Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Real American History. I'm your host, Tess Evans, public historian, and today I'm going to be talking about Saint-Domingue and the Haitian Revolution. Now, we are going to be focusing on the late 1700s, and the location is the island of what is now today known as Haiti. But it was once the island of Hispaniola, and it was owned by France and Spain. Now, France owned about a third, and they called their section Saint-Domingue, and the Spanish called the rest of the island Santo Domingo, which is actually now the Dominican Republic. So basically, we're talking about present-day Haiti, this section that used to be called Hispaniola and was ruled by the French, known as Saint-Domingue. But for the rest of the episode, I'll refer to Saint-Domingue as the island, so as not to confuse you. So the island was a very important economic driver for France and America because there were sugar, indigo, and coffee plantations there. And in 1790, just to give you an example of how important it was, America's exports from the island amounted to about $13 million. A lot of money. And there were also about 500,000 slaves who were working on those plantations, and many were owned by the French. And the slaves unfortunately experienced these extreme brutalities. And I have an account I'm about to read from a man who spent about half of his life as a slave there. Quote, "Have they not hung up men with heads downward, drowned them in sacks, crucified them on planks, bury them alive, crush them in mortars? Have they not forced them to eat shit? And having flayed them with the lash, have they not cast them alive to be devoured by worms, or on anthills, or lashed them on stakes in the swamps to be devoured by mosquitoes? Have they not thrown them into boiling cauldrons of cane syrup? Have they not put men and women into barrels studded with spikes and rolled them down mountainsides into the abyss? Have they not consigned these miserable blacks to man-eating dogs until the latter, sated by human flesh, left the mangled victims to be finished off by bayonet and poniard?" End quote. And that was a quote from the book A Disease of the Public Mind, Thomas Fleming. It's a great work if you want to understand more about the causes of the American Civil War. So now we are going to jump to the year 1793, when Great Britain and France declared war in what became known as the French Revolution. And America's role in this war was neutral. We were not involved, didn't really want to be involved. But this war was very important because there were people called the Jacobins during this war who were members of the French radical political group who essentially believed in universal liberty. And they issued a declaration freeing all slaves wherever France had control overseas, including the island. And the Jacobins also wanted to trigger slave revolts in Jamaica and other English colonies, including America. Now, after hearing this declaration, war erupted between slaves, white plantation owners, and British forces. There were plantations that were burned, along with homes, mills, and warehouses. The island pretty much became a war zone. And then amongst the leaders of the slaves was a black man named Toussaint Louverture, who was actually so thin he was nicknamed the Broomstick. But going further in this video, I will just pronounce his first name, Toussaint, for you all. But he could read and write, and he preached equality between blacks and whites, and started creating a multiracial society. Then American President John Adams saw an opportunity to take advantage of the upheaval on the island and continue their prosperous trade, so he sent supplies and ammunition to Toussaint's army. Toussaint beat the British forces, and he actually declared himself ruler of the island. He conquered the sections under Spanish control as well, and he banned slavery forever, but persuaded many of the former slaves to return to the plantations to work for pay. Excuse me. Now we're going to toss in another character, Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous French general. By 1800, he wanted to restore France's colonial empire, and that included reclaiming the island to French rule. And at this time, Thomas Jefferson had become president right after Adams in America, and he actually welcomed France's proposal to take back the island because Jefferson was always terrified of slave revolts, and especially revolts in the American South, some of which had already happened in Virginia and a few other colonies. And so that is why Jefferson took Napoleon's side with his wishes. And Jefferson really didn't see a way for a multiracial society. In 1801, Napoleon shipped a 20,000-man army to the island, and war erupted. The troops gained many of the parts of the island back before a lot of them became sick with yellow fever, which is spread through the bite of a mosquito, a certain type of mosquito. And Toussaint agreed to peace terms, but the war was not over. There was actually a lot of guerrilla warfare going on. And after a time, Toussaint actually thought about rejoining the fight, but he was captured and deported to France, where he then died in this fortress, this prison in the mountains north of the Western Alps. So what did Napoleon do? He reinstated slavery on the island, but the blacks rose up again and resisted, and there was more warfare. The French troops at this time, though, were starting to suffer from lack of food and supplies, and no aid was given until there were more troops who died of yellow fever that Napoleon sent for 15,000 men as replacements. Now, after Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million, what we know as the Louisiana Purchase, the French forces on the island surrendered as the British Navy started bombarding any French-held seaports. And so then in 1804, there was a general named Jacques Dessalines who fought during the uprising, and he became the ruler of the Saint-Domingue, the island, and declared it independent from France. And he changed the island's name to Haiti for the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean islands. So that's where we get the name Haiti for those indigenous peoples. Now, America's Congress voted not to recognize Haiti's independence because Jefferson wanted to separate himself and the country from any type of race war. And it wasn't until 1862, during the American Civil War, that America finally recognized Haiti's independence. So that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed learning about what became known as the Haitian Revolution. If you would like any suggestions about different topics or future episodes, or have any comments or want to talk about any other references, just shoot me an email at realahistory@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you're seeing and hearing. And as always, I will have a description and then sources for further reading and videos as well. But until next time, I will see you all. Take care and keep learning. Bye.